So good evening, everyone, and a really heartfelt welcome to you all to this, our very first online Gift for the Future event. A lot of you know me, but my name is Judy Anderson. I'm the Legacy Development Manager here at Greater Ormond Street Hospital Children's Charity. So I'm one of our hosts for today's event. Our other co-host is Ben Atkinson. He's our Grants Communications Manager, and he'll be taking over later to cover the research side of what we'll share with you today. He's got some really exciting, pioneering projects to cover. And let's hope, technology permitting, you'll also be able to hear and see that some videos we're going to play, because there are really some tremendous stories in those videos. And just to go on to talk about our housekeeping, if you do experience any technical problems, you can see at the bottom of the slide there, my colleague Ahmed, and you can email him at ahmed.ali@gosh.org. But please do bear in mind that if the problems are about your computer or broadband traffic, there isn't anything he can do about those, but he'll always do his best to help. He's a very clever chap. Here's our agenda. So it's really packed tonight. We've got lots of slides, lots of videos, and some inspiring patient stories. And we've got some special guest speakers, which will be the highlight, I'm sure. So I'll be talking about what's special about GOSH and how your kindness is helping to build a better future for the children in our care. I'll be covering what's been happening at the hospital and at the charity during the COVID pandemic. And then delighted to have Juliet Diener to share the story of her two children and the treatment they've had both before and during COVID. Ben will give a research update, and then we've got a tremendous video from one of our patients, Gabs, and her mum Lynn, and they've really kindly agreed to stay to the end and answer questions for you. And then I'll talk a little bit about what you can do to help secure the future for children at GOSH. Then we'll have our Q&A. So what is special about GOSH? There are really wonderful hospitals who are treating children throughout the UK, but really what's special about our hospital is that our patients are special. They're all referred to us, usually from those other hospitals, because they all have complex, rare, or sometimes multiple serious conditions that really need the very specialist care that GOSH can offer. And it's important for people to understand that GOSH is a nationwide hospital. Patients come from all over the country. More than half of them are from outside the Greater London conurbation. And for some of those children and their families, it's fair to say that the last hope they have is through coming to our hospital. You'll hear more about how special our staff are when families share their stories with you today. And of course, it's the kindness of our charity supporters, people like you, your special people. That's what makes a tremendous difference to the quality of the care GOSH can offer and to the impact it can have worldwide for generations to come through groundbreaking research. So what is new at GOSH, thanks to people like you? Well, nearing completion, as you can see here, is our new Sight and Sound Centre. This is for children with visual or hearing impairments. They're our biggest outpatient group. We normally see about 2,000 of them a month. And this new centre that you can see has been adapted from an existing GOSH building, the old Italian hospital, which is just round the corner from Great Ormond Street in Queen's Square. It's been completely refitted with an easy to navigate reception and a totally new clinical and research facilities. And we hope we'll be able to help make new breakthroughs there to help many thousands of children, like little Alfie shown here. He has Norrie disease. It's a genetic disorder that's already taken his sight, but sadly it's now starting to take his hearing as well. So a great area for potential research. And when the Sight and Sound Centre is due to open later this year, it will include a garden designed not only to stimulate the senses, but to provide a calming environment for children like Alfie. So you can just see it's in its early stages of sprouting. It sounds like it's probably going to open in July. And also equipment. We've had a big milestone recently with the £13 million intraoperative MRI scanner that the charities provided. So operating theatre on the left of the plan, MRI scanner on the right. So children can be operated on the left, then while anaesthetised, wheeled to the right so they can check that they've got the malignant or damaged tissue, and if they haven't, go back through to the operating theatre and fix that problem without the child having to go away, heal, and come back for repeated surgery. So a huge advance and much, much safer for the children. This is about patient accommodation and family accommodation, because that's not paid for by the NHS. It's a really important part of what we fund, and there are more than 100 patient and family rooms and some little flats. And this video from Austin's mum and dad, they'll tell you how much it meant to them.
Two. Right, move it two then.
Move it along to number 3. There.
Yeah.
This one, Austin.
Onto there.
Austin and Freddie were born at 25 weeks, weighing £1.10 and £1.11. They both had a bleed on the brain at birth. Thankfully, Freddie's cleared up, but unfortunately, Austin's didn't, and that led to many complications, including Austin being diagnosed with cerebral palsy. At birth, they were given less than 10% chance of survival, and actually Austin's chance of survival went down to as low as 1%. We lived in a hospital for over 3 months, sat literally looking at our newborn twins through an incubator.
They were unsure if he would ever walk, unsure of any other issues that come along the way. Would he be able to use his arms? Would he be able to use his legs? But he's a little fighter.
He's a warrior.
Absolutely. And a happy boy.
Everybody loves him, and he has so much love to give. Austin has had eight
surgeries now.
Surgeries under Great Ormond Street. It's somewhere as parents that you never want to have to take your children, but if you enter into that life, it's Great Ormond Street you want to be. Great Ormond Street for us, we've been there when Austin has been as young as
5 weeks.
5 weeks.
Having brain surgery.
Brain surgery. It shouldn't be possible, but they saved Austin's life. We've been rushed to Great Ormond Street by blue lights, I can't remember how many times. The place is a blessing. It allows families like us to continue our lives as normally as we can.
So during Austin's surgery, it was just phenomenal to be able to stay there at the hospital with him, not having to travel from Essex every day. It changed our lives really, because the travelling on top of the stress of the surgery and the anxiety, it would just be unbearable. So to be given a room to stay there with him, it's just unbelievable.
I think that the main thing for us was the communal area, so we could have breakfast all together, we could have dinner together. We made some really good friends. So there was a young boy that had the same operation as Austin, so every night we had dinner together, and it actually showed Austin that it was okay to be in a wheelchair because his friend was in a wheelchair. So for us, it allowed us to be as normal as possible, and it was kind of home from home. Coming from a family that have spent many years at Great Ormond Street and have relied on the family accommodation, we can really talk from our hearts what it's meant to us. It really is life-changing. Parents need it, children need it for rehabilitation, and it really does make a difference.
So, how has the pandemic affected Gosh? It's really been a big impact. Thankfully, very few children are seriously affected by the virus, but the hospital had to adapt very quickly, of course, to new ways of working And that began before the first lockdown, so that when COVID hit the UK, it was well prepared with PPE, and it wasn't being overwhelmed with COVID cases like adult hospitals. So we've got protection measures at the moment, which mean that only one parent can be with the child during treatment. And it has to be the same parent for the first 2 weeks, then they can change weekly, but no siblings can come, which is tough, but it's essential to minimize risk. And through our charity, tablet computers have been made available for the children so they can keep in touch with family and friends who can't visit. We've taken in paediatric patients from hospitals all across London to free up their wards for adult COVID patients, and hugely increased our ICU capacity. One big change has been that GOSH has been treating many more young children with serious mental health problems during the pandemic, mainly adolescents and teenagers, including some who've had to be sectioned and really needed a safe haven. And a lot of the non-urgent procedures, like any hospital, have had to be postponed, and it'll take a long time to catch up with the easing of lockdown. And we know there's likely to be a surge in new referrals across all conditions, as families haven't been able to get access to their local hospital specialists who would have referred them on to GOSH. So busy times ahead. And what has the charity been doing to support? Of course, we asked the hospital what it needed most urgently, launched an appeal, and we were able to provide rapid testing equipment for the safety of the patients and staff. And in those alarming early days when travel and food shopping was so difficult, we were able to arrange free support from businesses, a lot of them local, so staff could stay near the hospital and have access to free meals. We set up a free top quality coffee counter. And now that may seem a little thing, but the hospital staff keep telling us how much they love it and how it gets them through a long and grueling shift and really makes them feel appreciated. And the charity's invested in some rapid response COVID-19 research. Ben will tell you about that later. And so you've really made a transformational change during that time. And of course, we still have to raise enough money to continue everything we do to support the hospital and its research. Like most charities, our income's down, but we work very hard to refocus our fundraising and cut costs. And we know the coming times will be challenging, but we're very aware that all the children at GOSH will be needing our help and your help more than ever. The playrooms in each ward had to be closed to control infection, and a lot of patients, the inpatients, they've had to stay in their rooms, but thanks to supporters like you, our wonderful army of play workers were able to continue working with the children, help them be less bored and lonely and relieve their anxiety and build their resilience. They've produced thousands of activity packs, lots of art stuff and sensory toys, and we funded walkie-talkies so the children could keep in touch with the staff and other patients while they're in isolation. And that team, the play team, also launched some resources online called The Power of Play that's had around 100,000 views. And that's used to help entertainment all across the UK, regardless of health, while they've been stuck at home in lockdown, help them cope with their feelings based on the experience of the children in the hospital whose conditions mean they can't go out. I'm really delighted to introduce our guest speaker, GOSH parent Juliet Diener. Juliet, over to you. I am going to switch my microphone off, and if you could switch yours on.
Hello, everybody. It's really lovely to be with you. Can you all hear me? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Everybody can hear me. Good.
Yes.
I know this is not how we would like to meet. We'd much rather be out enjoying cheese and wine or something like that with each other. And just thank you to Gosh and Judy for making it happen. Even though technology is not always on our side, we're here, and it's just great to be with you. And you can see these are my children, Emily and Luke. And this picture was taken a couple of years ago now, where we were part of the Paul O'Grady Little Hero series. I'm hoping that some of you caught that, because I thought it was a fabulous series, not just as a family to be part of it, but also for us as a family to witness the story of other families. We just loved it, and it just really helped us feel even more grateful for Gosh. But I want to introduce you to my wonderful little people, and if Judy goes to the next slide, you'll see that they're a lot bigger than they were in this picture. So hopefully we can get that slide up and you can see how they are. There we go. You can see they've grown some, and one of the photos is after an exciting Easter egg hunt that every child just adores to be able to do. And as you can see, the Easter bunny was very generous. And then the other one is the two of them out and about, just scooting around, as we love doing as a family. We love to go exploring. We love to find new places, go walking, especially if it involves ice cream. So there's always a lot of that going on. And you can just look at them and see what happy children they are. Emily and Luke have a thirst for life. They crave adventure. They love to laugh. And most of all, they love being together. They have a special bond which goes beyond just being brother and sister, but is embedded in the fact that both of them are living with the condition called cystic fibrosis. I will never forget the day that the Gosh nurse turned up at my door to tell me that my then newborn little baby, Emily, had a chronic illness and that it was life-limiting and that our lives would be changed forever. However, I couldn't imagine that 3 years later, that same news would be relayed again, as Luke was also diagnosed with the same condition. Every step of the way, there have been two constants. The first being my husband and myself, absolutely devoted and loving and committed to the care of our children, that's motivated us. And secondly, the unwavering continued support of Gosh that has helped us and provided for us along the way, and many times through very dark days. Just by way of information, cystic fibrosis, or is often referred to as CF, is a progressive disease which mainly impacts on the lungs, but begins to impact on the other organs too. And it can be very changeable, and it needs to be monitored really regularly and intensely. And in layman's terms, basically, Emily and Luke's body overproduces mucus, specifically in their lungs, and basically this mucus starts to block, causes blockage of their airways, which then causes infections, and then obviously leads to a lot of lung damage. And I suppose if you had to look at them, you would never think that they are sick children. But I think that's one of the joys and the benefits of being under Gosh's care, is that many of the children, even in some of the pictures that we've seen this evening, whilst they are going through so many difficult procedures, they manage to still embrace and experience and enjoy life. And yet these two wonderful warriors of mine need to attend numerous clinical appointments on a regular basis, as well as hospital admissions. So every third month, each of them goes in separately for IV admissions to treat and support their care of cystic fibrosis. This is then on top of daily intensive chest physiotherapy, specialized diet, lots of medication. And currently, Emily takes 50 tablets a day to help maintain her care. And CF requires a great deal of daily care, thought, and planning, which is interweaved into the busy lives of an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old who are just dying to experience life on a regular basis. The condition requires a high vigilance as things change and risks increase. And one of those risks, which changed everything, was COVID-19. As CF is a respiratory condition, Emily and Luke were first placed in the highest risk category, and we were guided by Gosh to shield early. And as a family, we began shielding. And again, once again, the children, they stepped into that process with their immense bravery and began it with absolute cheer in their hearts. But as we all know, no one predicted it would be so long and so challenging. And it absolutely has been. Living with CF is challenging on its own. Adding an additional layer of a pandemic almost feels quite overwhelming. However, we knew that whilst shielding, we needed to manage the children's care and we needed to remain committed to our admissions at Gosh. One of the beauties of Gosh is that it is a home away from home. When we arrive on the ward, we are greeted and welcomed as if we are returning home. And it is this very community of nurses, physios, doctors, cleaners, kitchen staff, security guards, and of course our beloved play workers that create the fabric of Gosh's safety net. Gosh enables sick children to still experience being a child whilst being in hospital. The entrance is usually filled with volunteers in yellow t-shirts, giggle doctors wandering around, and artists engaging with parents while they wait in the waiting areas, and of course our therapy dogs wandering around for a little cuddle with whoever is up for a cuddle, which we absolutely love. As the pandemic began, the Gosh experience, as with everything else, had to change. Firstly, and most obviously, everyone looked very different for the children. So as you see in the next slide that Judy will share, this is Luke preparing to go into theatre, and one of the wonderful play workers, Lizzie, who was helping him to prepare to go into theatre. She had to, wear full PPE, and that took a lot of getting used to. And not only for the children, but for the staff. And if we look at the next slide, you'll see Emily and Lizzie playing with PPE. So trying to help Emily adjust to what it was. They were sort of making a dance around, stop COVID, we're not letting you get any closer. And they allowed Emily to play with some of the equipment so that it felt more, it normalized it. Secondly, the amount of people in and around the hospital changed, and whilst there were still many faces we still recognized and loved, we had to keep distances, and their smiles were hidden by masks. Whilst the pandemic forced us all to create space between us with distancing and masks and protective clothing and less groups of workers coming in to see the children and less of a buzz in the hospital, we always felt the support of Gosh team, and even more so as we needed it even more. Physical distance, masks and PPE didn't stop the staff in finding creative ways to connect to the children, to support them, to cheer them. I mean, one of my loveliest memories is one of the nurses knew that my son loves Star Wars and he loves Baby Yoda, and he had a Baby Yoda mug, and every now and again he'd stand at the door and just sort of show Luke the mug, and Luke would just be like, oh, great, because coming in and out was a problem. He'd have to put on equipment, and you could only have so many coming in. So just that little gesture of walking past, showing the mug and saying, I see you and I remember you. I remember one time when Emily came into the ward and Lizzie knew she was coming on, and there were some balloons around. They were allowed to have these balloons at this time with COVID regulations. And she gathered up some of the balloons and put them specially in Emily's room and decorated her room for her. So when she arrived, being on the ward felt like a celebration. We almost thought that there was a party. So these small gestures of staff that just made it still feel wonderful, even though it looked different. In preparing for tonight's talk, I asked Emily and Luke what they found most challenging being at Gosh during the pandemic, and both of their responses were missing the fact that visitors couldn't come in, and that we as a family had to be separated, and that there weren't as many play workers. Whilst we had specific play workers, there weren't as many as we normally had, and the playrooms weren't open, as you've heard already. So that challenge of being as a family, of being separated, was really difficult for us, and still is, because we're going in again in a couple of weeks, and so we're constantly having to manage that. But it forced us to have to rely on the Gosh team even more so, as they continued to be our extended family, and they fulfilled that role beautifully, as they remembered things about the children, and they asked them questions from when we'd been in town before, remembered various birthdays, so really feeling part of that extended family experience. Over time, and with greater understanding of COVID-19, small joys have returned, and at least now more play workers have been allowed back and are coming in to allowed to stay in the rooms and play games and do art activities with the children, which they are absolutely loving. My two are completely Uno card game obsessed, and any play worker that enters the room gets challenged immediately to a game. But what was been so lovely is, because of COVID-19, they've laminated all the cards so that they can be wiped clean afterwards. And I just thought, isn't that wonderful? Instead of banning, sorry, can't play Uno, they just said, right, how do we make that possible? To still make the game possible for the children and the play workers to do together. What has continued to amaze me throughout the pandemic is that the care for my family has never faltered. I have felt informed, up to date, and held by all at GOSH throughout. Not because they always knew the answer. This is definitely not the case, because during the pandemic, all of us were uncertain. But as always, the ethos of GOSH prevails that the child comes first, and everyone lives and breathes this approach. At every moment, I felt complete trust in how GOSH were responding to the pandemic. And whilst at times it was incredibly difficult for our family, I knew that every decision that was made was for the best care for my family. And what was also lovely is that the team acknowledged the difficulty for us. They acknowledged it was different. They acknowledged that it was tough. And they acknowledged how brave the children were being in adapting and adjusting. Nobody just enters a room at GOSH. They come to visit someone very important, and that is how they make every little person feel every time a member of team comes in. You always feel like you're the center of the world and that you're so important, and they are going to do everything that they can to make sure that your experience is as best possible. And they make that clear for big people too. I've had many an extra pillow land up on my bed just because the nurse realized I needed it. Hospital life during the pandemic remains challenging, but I have such certainty that whatever unfolds, that the GOSH team have my family's best interests at hand, and that they will guide us through this process. The safety net that they've created is always there. It may just look sometimes different from what we're used to. And for this, I'm forever grateful. Thank you for being here tonight and for all that you do for GOSH, which impacts directly on my little warriors, Emily and Luke. Thank you, everyone.
That was amazing. You're a wonderful speaker and so inspiring, such a life-affirming story. And Emily and Luke are absolutely gorgeous, amazing kids. So thank you again. And everyone, Juliet will be here later for the Q&A session. Ben, over to you. Thank you for your patience.
Well, thank you very much, Judy, and welcome everyone. Juliet, just want to say that was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's with great pleasure that I'm here to speak to you about research at GOSH, and I'm very excited to do so. Now, not everyone is aware that GOSH is very much a research hospital. Now, that's what really makes us stand out in the UK and have a worldwide impact and reputation. Every day, around 900 potentially life-changing research studies are active at GOSH. Now that involves many different people, from nurses to doctors and clinicians, to get involved, as well as active patients, to really research some of the life-threatening conditions that GOSH treats. Now, GOSH Charity is the UK's largest dedicated funder of child health research. Some of you might not know that. And the charity has a really ambitious research strategy and is currently working towards raising £50 million to help develop kinder treatments and cures for seriously ill children. Now, the children and beyond that, the adults they will become, are at the heart of everything that we do at GOSH and at the charity. Ultimately, research funded by our supporters benefits not only children at GOSH and other hospitals in the UK and around the world, but also generations of children which are yet to be born. So next, I'm going to talk to you about a building called the Zayed Centre for Research into Rare Diseases in Children, which just for sake of time, I'm going to refer to as the Zayed Centre from now on. And it celebrated its 1-year anniversary last year. Now, the centre's labs don't just carry out research, they can manufacture clinical grade gene and cell therapies. Now, due to its state-of-the-art facilities, it's actually one of the few centres, in the UK able to produce COVID-19 virus samples for use in vaccination studies. And as part of a national study, researchers in the genomics lab are leading the virus, the virus genetics in different populations, not just children. And this gene sequencing, which is a very specialist technique, can detect not just the virus, but the variant a patient has and the potential new mutations. This research aims to help the scientific community understand how the virus is spreading and whether some strains are more dangerous than others. This is vital information to help ensure treatments and vaccines stay safe now, but also very much in the future. Next, pioneering research in the global fight against COVID-19. So GOSH, like the rest of the NHS, has very much been on the forefront of the fight against COVID-19. And here at the charity, we're supporting many studies, which I'm going to touch upon now. So we're supporting research into how the virus specifically affects children and how it might be transmitted by them, which is obviously extremely important. Now, this is vitally important as well because most of the research currently is done in adults, investigates how the virus affects adults, how it's transmitted between adults, and not specifically children. Now, don't get me wrong, this is for good reason, as COVID-19 only affects a very small proportion of children compared to adults. However, it can still be life-threatening, so it's absolutely crucial that we understand it more thoroughly. As a result, we are funding 14 projects at GOSH into the management of COVID-19, including how the immune system reacts to the virus and how to monitor certain conditions from home, such as cardiac conditions and also seizures and things like that, and much, much, much more. Next, I'm going to talk to you about a very rare condition called pediatric inflammatory multisystem syndrome, temporarily associated with SARS-CoV-2. And SARS-CoV-2 is the virus which causes the disease known as COVID-19. But for the sake of this, I'm going to refer to that very long-winded name as PIMS-TS. And whilst most children are asymptomatic, meaning that they exhibit very mild symptoms from COVID-19, a small number develop a rare but potentially life-threatening condition weeks after having the virus, and this is known as PIMS-TS, and it's very similar to toxic shock syndrome, which some of you might be familiar with. Now, PIMS-TS occurs when the immune system, which has been fighting off COVID-19, overreacts and negatively affects other parts of the child's body. Now, it's an inflammatory syndrome, so if you bang your knee, for example, and it goes red and a bit swollen, that's inflammation in a specific area. But in an inflammatory syndrome, what happens is it's inflammation systemically, so in the body, something that you can't see but will affect your organs. Now, this can affect many organs in the child's body, including the heart, the kidneys, and the liver, and even the brain. Some children will also develop an inflammation of the brain, which is quite severe, and it can leave children very unwell and cause them to be in intensive care and can actually be life-threatening. Whilst children like Luca, which is pictured here in the image that you can see with his arms around his mum and dad, recover from this condition, luckily, many unanswered questions still remain, such as the risk of potential relapse and long-term impact on health, neurological, psychological, and cognitive outcomes. Teams of researchers across GOSH and other leading research institutions are now working to understand more about this condition and why some children develop it, and more importantly, why others don't. GOSH researchers have also developed a new laboratory test to monitor cytokine levels. Now, cytokines, I know what you're thinking, what are cytokines? I was like that. And then cytokines are actually inflammatory proteins, which are very important in terms of an overactive immune response. In recent months, this test has played a crucial role into monitoring the health of children with PIMS-TS and how they're reacting to COVID-19 and how their condition progresses. If you can just go to the next slide, Judy. This is actually my favourite one. I know it looks very technical, everyone, but I'm going to explain it. So this is about CAR T therapy, and this is a very innovative therapy, and part of it was pioneered at GOSH, and I'm really excited to present this to you today. So in 2019, GOSH became the first UK hospital to offer a new treatment called CAR T therapy, which is a type of immunotherapy to NHS patients with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which I'm going to refer to as ALL. Now, ALL is a severe, life-threatening form of leukemia that affects around 600 people per year, most of whom, though, are children between the ages of 2 and 5. Although treatments have improved steadily throughout the years, approximately 10% of patients still relapse, even after having chemotherapy. So some of you might be thinking, how does CAR T therapy work? Well, there's a nice graphic on screen, but hopefully I'll give you an analogy which might explain it further. So if you think of, in a similar way to how we use cars with GPS to help us reach our destination and understand where we're going, researchers are using patients' own immune cells as vehicles, and by equipping them with the navigational knowledge, they can detect and destroy cancer cells. Now, CAR T therapy could offer children and their families the chance of a long-term cure, even after treatments such as chemotherapy and even bone marrow transplantation have failed. Researchers are now developing innovative CAR T therapies for children with other cancerous tumours, such as neuroblastoma, and the list goes on. There are many others in the pipeline. And it is the hope that this could offer an effective and potentially kinder alternative to things like chemotherapy and radiotherapy. Thanks, Judy. Now here is Yuvan, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit about his story and his success. So Yuvan, who's pictured here, was one of the first children to be offered the new form of CAR T therapy known as Kymera. Now, cricket fan and Lego enthusiast and very smiley, as you can tell, child Yuvan was diagnosed with leukemia in 2014 when he was 6 years old. Now, unfortunately, the standard treatments were not successful in treating Yuvan. So in 2018, he underwent a bone marrow transplantation, which is quite a severe treatment. But sadly, again, even though he had this care, he relapsed. Now, doctors at GOSH and researchers started treating Yuvan by collecting his specific immune cells and programming them to recognize and kill cancer cells. And these were returned to Yuvan. And that's the CAR T therapy that I mentioned before. Now, his parents described this therapy as a true last hope, which highlights the importance of this research in this area. It will be a while before the outcome of this powerful new therapy is known, but the treatment has shown to be very promising in clinical trials, and we are very hopeful it will help. Whilst Yuvan was at hospital, he spent a lot of time playing with his Lego and drawing portraits of his nurses at GOSH, and I think one of them you can just see blurred out in front of him. Now, you may remember seeing a patient, Gabs, who featured in one of our TV ads. Now, Gabs on the left with her mum, Lynn, has an extremely rare condition known as juvenile dermatomyositis, or JDM. Now, Gabs and her mum, Lynn, will now share the story through a video which is filmed during the summer lockdown about what their journey at GOSH has been like. And they've also kindly agreed to join us tonight to answer any questions you may have at the end of the session.
Hi, my name is Lynn, and my daughter Gabs has an incredibly rare autoimmune disease called juvenile dermatomyositis, or JDM for short. JDM only affects 2 to 3 children in every million per year, and it doesn't have a cure. It's a disease where the immune system sends off antibodies to attack the skin and the muscles. It comes out of nowhere, and GPs have never heard of it. Gabs went from being perfectly ordinary, perfectly healthy, to within 2 months being in a wheelchair because she couldn't walk and having a feeding tube because she was at risk of choking on her own saliva. Her lungs were also severely affected. We lived in GOSH for 6 months, 4 months on the ward and 2 months in patient accommodation. Whilst we were at GOSH, Gabs went to physio for 3 hours every day. She had chemo infusions, chemo injections, 1,000 milligram pulses of steroids and several other medications. When we were discharged, Gabs then went up to GOSH every month for 2 days of infusions. Last year, Gabs was amazingly said to be in remission on medication, but we still go up for clinic every 3 months, and at the moment we're shielding Gabs to keep her safe in the current crisis. I'll now let Gabs talk to you about how your funds support GOSH.
Hi, I'm Gabs and I'm now almost 15. Every single penny that you raise for GOSH makes such a huge difference to the lives of patients like me. As you can imagine, being really poorly when you're so young was very challenging and scary at times. However, one thing that really helped me were the fantastic play team. The play worker on my ward was called Lauren, and she'd come in my room and sit with me, and we'd just chat and play on my phone. This was amazing as it gave me the chance to be like any other normal 10-year-old girl and to forget about hospital life. Another thing that your money goes towards is the phenomenal research. Research helps to find drugs for JDM patients and others with rare diseases. It will also hopefully one day help to find a cure for JDM. As well as this, your money also goes towards patient accommodation around the corner from Gosh. After my 4 months of living in Gosh, me and Mum moved into patient accommodation because I was getting better but wasn't yet well enough to go home. This was important as it gave me and Mum a chance to start weaning back into normal life. Finally, your money also helps to build new wards. My old ward was called Penguin and it was in the oldest part of Gosh, the Southwood building. It was tiny and there was something called the shared room, which I absolutely hated. It was a room which you had to share with another family going through their own difficulties, with a thin curtain separating you from them. I hated it because there was no privacy at all, and that is the main thing that you absolutely have to have when you're in hospital. You need your own space and a chance to just be able to relax on your own without anyone sharing a room with you. Recently, the new Premier and Clinical building was finally finished. The Premier and Clinical building is absolutely incredible as it's huge and there's thankfully no shared room. A building where you can stay in and have your own space is so important for patients.
Thank you so much for supporting Gosh at this incredibly difficult time.
And please stay safe. Thank you again.
Thank you, stay safe.
Aidan arrived at Great Ormond Street on the 6th of July 2017. She was diagnosed with high-risk neuroblastoma. She came in with a 15cm tumour in her abdomen, and that's where our journey started, and we stayed there for 3 weeks before we finally got home. Neuroblastoma is a really aggressive, nasty cancer. It just chews away at lives, of children's lives and families, and I've never known anything to be quite so powerful and cruel. She started on a protocol called Rapid Kojak, which is 3 different chemos in total over 80 days. We are one of the lucky families, and Eden is one of the lucky children to have survived after the treatment she's had. She's become such a happy child after going through such a difficult time, and I think she's come out of it smiling. Great Ormond Street Hospital is it's a magical place. The staff at Great Ormond Street aren't like staff anywhere else. They work with their hearts. You know that they're there and they love them kids and they love your child, and you know that everything they're doing, they want your child to get better. They want your kid to be one of those children that's okay. And that's all of our kids. And you can feel how much they love them. To see my 4-year-old running around makes me realise how lucky I am. I thought we were going to turn into a family of 3. Great Ormond Street will always have a place in my heart. They will always be the people that saved her and let me keep my baby. To support Great Ormond Street isn't to support a hospital. You're supporting every family, every child, everyone that comes through that door. And if it wasn't for Great Ormond Street, I'm not convinced I'd still have my child.
Gosh is a place that's really full of skill, and it's full of love for the children and its care. And the coming decades really will be transformational for paediatric medicine. And It can only really continue being a world-class hospital in those decades to come through support of people like you. So we hope that you might think of a special gift of hope for the future through a gift in your will. They've been a lifeline for the hospital, and some of you here today have already let us know kindly that we're in your will, and we can't thank you enough. It's such a compassionate thing to do. It's about your values, it's about how you want to be remembered. It can be a comfort to people who, when you're no longer around, people who care about you, that they know you did this special thing that would live on. And if any of the rest of you are thinking it's about time you updated your will, we hope that you might, once you've looked after your nearest and dearest, maybe spare a little bit for the children at Gosh. And now I have a special video to play from the top person at Gosh. He recorded it just for this event. So I'm really hopeful that you might be able to hear the sound from this.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Matthew Shaw. I'm the Chief Executive of Great Ormond Street Hospital. I've been here now for around about 2.5 years as Chief Executive, and I was Medical Director before that. I'm an orthopaedic surgeon by background. Thank you for being here this evening. It's really fantastic that you've chosen to spend the time, and a really heartfelt thank you to you and also the charity for supporting us through what has been a, well, how can we describe the last year in terms of how it's gone. The support that the charity's given us is so much around whether it's our labs, whether it's our manufacturing of COVID-19 in order to test for vaccines, the help and logistical support around food or transport for staff, which has hugely helped staff getting to work in what has been quite difficult, anxiety-provoking times with most of our staff living outside of the M25. And also the amount of funding that the charity's given us for the huge amount of research we've been doing around COVID-19 in children, as well as all our other research that we have on the go at any particular time. I think the future looks so bright. I think actually we're on the dawn of some monumental discoveries in innovation. We already have the first keys to the door in many of these conditions, and we have the startings of genetic therapies which make huge differences to children's lives, and conditions which were previously would lead to a child sadly passing away now lead to long-term survival with good quality of life. And there will be more of these coming through in a pipeline over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And that's super exciting and motivating for all of us in the hospital. And it's your support and the charity support which really makes that difference from the NHS care we can provide, but the overall treatment we really want to deliver to an excellent standard for all the parents and children that come through our doors. It does make a huge difference for me as Chief Executive to know that we've got the ability to do some of these wonderful, innovative things in the hospital and know that's going to benefit children. So however you want to support us, I really appreciate the time you're spending. I really appreciate all the work the charity's done. And I look forward to a more peaceful next year, hopefully following vaccination and hopefully calmer waters. Thank you very much.
I just want to say thank you so much to everybody for joining. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your tolerance. Thank you for being true friends of Gosh. You really are. You're part of our big Gosh family, and we hope that you will be, lifelong and perhaps even beyond. And a special thank you to Ben for co-hosting, and to Juliet and Gabs for their wonderful stories that they shared today. But it's been really delightful to see you all, and given us a lot to learn and a lot to think about for when we run any kind of event like this in the future. So once again, thank you, and bye, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Take care.